Anotherway, Erasmus Plus Program, Cooperation for Innovation and the Exchange of Good Practices, KA205, Strategic Partnership for Europe, funded by EU, number 2019-2-IT 03-KA205-016466. Co-funded by the Erasmus Plus Program of the European Union. Mediterranea, Associazione per lo Sviluppo Locale. This work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 International License. To view a copy of this license, visit http://creativecommons.org or send a letter to Creative Commons, P.O. Box 1866, Mountain View, CA 94042, USA. Per altra via. Anotherway. An original method by Francesco Piccolo. Module 3. Through. Lessons 1 and 2. The Signs. We have established that our way of tourism is based on the human person and his or her rights. We are primarily concerned with bringing the tourist together with the host community, the community that we are presenting to them during the tour. But how do we make this possible? Through what do we tell the history and culture of the place? And how do we reach these contents? These are the questions that I will try to answer in these lessons. At the beginning of this third and penultimate module, through, it should be clarified, however, that as a psychologist, studies and insights in areas outside psychology are filtered through my training. Therefore, as already happened in the second module, with respect to ethics as a discipline, I do not intend to provide an exhaustive examination of all the theories and authors who have expressed themselves on the art and the interpretative codes of the art, but rather to share with you the results of the readings and in-depth studies that have allowed me to develop the Per altra via Anotherway method. Extrapolating a story or message from a work of art is always, and in any case, an interpretative work. It would be useful to recover here what has been said about language and brain areas. In fact, we know that there are specific areas that respond to the vision of shapes and colors. We also know that these stimuli are treated by the brain not so differently from how you do with a character during reading or a figure during calculation. Those codes are just more linear and respond less to personal variables such as emotions, personal history, cultural metrics. So, if art is a form of language, however complex, fascinating, beautiful, it has the same purpose: to communicate a message. Anyone who places himself in front of a painting or a sculpture will draw different conclusions, and we already know that perception itself is an interpretative process with as many variables as there are people and contexts. Objectifying art is like asking a robot to express on its silicone face the whole range of human emotions. Utopian, useless, paradoxical. However, it is possible to see in every work of art at least one message, the one intentionally codified by the artist, the only one that really possesses its meaning. This message reflects the cultural codes contemporary to the artist himself. There is also an unconscious meaning that we can grasp. Arnheim teaches us, as if the work of art were a dream of the artist. And therefore, as with dreams, this meaning is configured more as hypothesis than as certainty. Finally, some general rules. I am thinking, for example, of the use of perspective, by which every artist is influenced, whether he respects them or contrasts them. The question then is, how do I place myself in front of a representation or a sculpture? Let's deal at the moment with the first of the two forms of art, painting. I speak of representation by including in this term at least two other types of painting, the fresco and the icon. The last type, the icon, as a sacred representation of Christianity, will be treated as a separate subject. Let us start with canvases and frescoes. In front of a painting, having overcome the initial emotion, which is in any case precious, I wonder, what is depicted? A set of points and lines that make type forms, most of which I know, accentuated or dampened by the use of colors. This is, in my opinion, the simplest and also the most exhaustive answer. Any sign is, in fact, a line or a point, And our mind needs to give meaning even to randomly arranged signs, so it will tend to interpret them as parts of a known form. Let's think of the constellations. The stars are there in space, without a pre-established order, with all due respect to creationists. Yet we distinguish Aries, Canis Minor, Cassiopeia, etc. In the paintings, instead, these signs have been placed, in almost all cases, intentionally, and the figures have been placed according to a precise scheme and in such a way as to suggest to our sight a message not necessarily coincident, indeed almost never coincident, with the form itself. Let's take as an example this oil on canvas by Artemisia Gentileschi from 1620, kept in Budapest. The title of the work is deliberately not reported in the caption for educational purposes. There's a young man lying on the floor, sleeping with his head between a woman's thighs bent over him. The kneeling woman is on her right side, and her arms are open to make a violent act. Let's summarize it in geometric figures and lines. In my opinion, this is a satisfactory solution. The man's body, lying on the kneeling woman's lap, forms the base of a rectangular triangle, whose height starts from the woman's left shoulder, and which has as hypotenuse the line that always reaches the man's shoes from the woman's left shoulder. This geometric figure, the triangle I highlighted in white, is intersected by an arc of circumference in red that goes from the right hand of the woman at the top to the left hand at the bottom, passing behind her head. This intersection of figures leads to the heart of the painting, because there is a third line that we could draw, the one of the force, intended as a vector, that from A will go to B, and that I have drawn in blue. The painter wanted to compose the scene in this way, so that our gaze can converge on the exact point B, which is the very object of the representation. Are you skeptical? Try to draw a line starting from B and going straight to the woman's forehead, following her nose, as if you were looking at her in reverse. What do you see? Are we aware that in this way the painter suggests the intentionality of the action? It is voluntary, deliberate. The human knows where and how to strike to kill. On the movements understood as postures, that is, how characters in a painting have hands, arms, eyes, torso, there is an interesting compendium written by Barbara Pasquinelli, who, starting from the assumption that painting is a silent poetry, tries to return a sort of grammar where the inner states, the movements of the soul, are expressed through the body. She identifies 6 different types of gestures. 1. Descriptive gestures are those with illustrative character. They can indicate an action, an object, a content, or a story. An example is the pointed index finger. If it is pointed up, it draws a higher and transcendent entity. If pointed horizontally, it draws the attention of the person indicated. If finally it is on the lips, it indicates the silence of meditation and wisdom. Signum Harpocraticum. 2. Expressive gestures mostly connote inner states, feelings, emotions, expressed through the movements and postures of hands, arms, feet, and legs. For example, palm-faced hands indicate acceptance, but if arms are outstretched, they indicate rejection. Hands in pronation indicate resignation, as in prisoners. B. Hand on one's chest indicates repentance, on another's chest, possession. Hands crossed at chest indicates total donation. Hands holding the chin or resting on the cheek indicate a reflective attitude of those who meditate on what they feel. The hand on the shoulder is a sign of encouragement, a sign of trust. Having your hands on your knees or on your hips and thighs is affirmation of authority. Hands grasping someone's wrists indicates that the grasper has the power to decide the other's life itself. hands grasping another person's beard or hair indicates that that person is the object of derision and violence. About the arms. Arms extended over one or more people are a sign of protection and intercession. Arms outstretched downwards indicates physical or mental death. Crossed arms are used to indicate lie and contradiction. If wrists are crossed and hands are in pronation, this clearly indicates impotence. Horizontally extended arms with palms facing outwards indicate separation. Folded arms are a sign of inactivity. Finally, the lower limbs. Tangent heels and distant toes in the Middle Ages indicate stability and balance. Trampling and grasping ankles are instead clear gestures of supremacy. Three, the gestures of communication introduce the interactions between the characters and represent speech, adlocutio and talk in hand, argumentation, digital computation, intimate relationships, kiss and dextrarum iunctio. 4. The gestures that express despair reveal physical, but above all, intimate and moral suffering. They are pulling one's hair, tearing one's clothes, clutching one's wrists, covering one's face, raising one's arms. Five. The obscene gestures are those of slapping, insulting, cursing, sexual allusion. They usually involve the whole body and can have apotropic value. 6. Ritual gestures manifest themselves as symbols of a ritual, of a sacred or civil ceremony, and are carriers of meaning in a communicative relationship. They refer to high moral or divine qualities. In summary, we have identified the forms, the actors, the movements. We know the epilogue, but do we know the story? How many stories does a painting contain? This one, Jael and Sisera by Artemisia Gentileschi from 1620. How many does it have, for example? The first level is the painted story, the one inside the painting, which is the title of the work itself. Jael, the woman, kills Sisera, the man, by sticking a peg in his temple, while he sleeps on her lap. The artist paints this moment, this gesture, and chooses to do it this way. But what story is he referring to? This is useful news if we want to fully understand the artist's message. Let's go into the second level. In our case, the inspiring story, the one outside the painting, is an episode from the Bible, taken from the book of Judges. Sisera, general of the Canaanites, fleeing the Israelites, who defeated him, arrives in the camp of his allies and meets Jael. She welcomes him into her tent and offers him milk and shelter. She covers him with a blanket, and when he falls asleep, she takes a tent peg and sticks it into the temples of Sisera with a hammer, taking revenge for the wrongs suffered in the past by the Canaanites and espousing the Israelites. Thus, Deborah's prophecy is fulfilled. Finally, there is a third level, which, if we wish, concerns us very closely as observers. How did this painting end up in front of us? What is its story? Not the one painted, or the one that inspired him, but his own. Who painted it? At what time in his life? In what artistic historical period? On commission or freely? If on commission, who was the commissioner? Has it always been here where we see it now? Even the frescoes are sometimes relocated. If he was elsewhere before, why is it here now? These are the questions that link the work to the community to which it is entrusted as a portion of the universal artistic heritage that is made available to tourists. As operators of AW, this information concerns us even more than if we were mere observers. Let's go back to Budapest, in front of our oil on canvas by Artemisia Gentileschi. We know that it is part of the famous collection of Prince Nicolaus II Esterhazy, 1765 to 1833, who inherited the passion for art from his grandfather Nicolaus I Esterhazy, 1714 to 1790, called the Magnificent, founder of the noted collection. Traveling throughout Europe as an engaged diplomat, Esterhazy established close relations with the art market. He was tied to the Liechtenstein dynasty and to the Viennese court. How it arrived in this collection is unknown to me, but we know that the painting was probably commissioned by Cosimo II dei Medici in Florence. Artemisia, the author, was there in those years and worked mainly for him. But this is a hypothesis. In fact, the client remains unknown. We know, however, that Artemisia arrived in Florence from Rome, the city where the Renaissance gave way to the Baroque, and Caravaggio snatched colors from the night and shapes from darkness. Rome is the city of the Inquisition, where Artemisia, a painter's daughter, undergoes a trial for rape. At the time, she was the victim who was tortured to prove the truth of her accusations against the aggressor, which is why I write suffers. She was raped, but she had to prove it. From that experience, she will write, "On the canvas I will avenge my rape. Give me an army that I will fight. Give me a battlefield and you will hear the crash of my strength against its meekness, the clangor of my violence against the whisper of his sacristy goodness. Give me a war, because at the age of 21 I possess weapons already well forged, swords to sink into the lust of princes and cardinals, in the form of Cleopatra, Lucretia, Venus, and Suzanne, pikes to skewer in the perversions of my customers, in the guise of Judith, Magdalene, and Jael." By looking at the painting, it seems to me that Artemisia has managed to take a revenge. The clothes, the ornaments, the air are those of his time, the 1600s, but the episode dates back millennia earlier. Jail could be herself. We at AW should not just look at a painting or a fresco, but talk with it, as we have now done with Jail and Caesarea. From the results of this dialogue, we will know what to give back of the painting to those who cannot see it. Our dialogue is not only with the painting, but on the painting, in the sense that we will obviously try to compare it with those who can give us useful elements to understand it, both by voice and in writing. Let us now focus on the sacred icons. Already, the sacred term makes us understand how these paintings deserve a separate treatment as a sign of respect for the Christians who worship them. Moreover, the creation of an icon, precisely in relation to its being an object of worship, has precise rules. Finding an icon in a museum will already tell us that we see it out of its context. Icons are born to be in places destined for prayer and worship, both in the home, beauty corner, and in the church, iconostasis. The subjects represented will always be sacred, since from the Gospel, linked to a specific liturgical feast or representations of Christ, the Madonna descends. A first and substantial difference is that the icons are not painted, they are written. The term obviously does not refer to the technique as much as to the artist's intention. He wants to recount, put on board, the mystery of the holiness of God, on which he has reflected, meditated, prayed. The iconographer writes what is dictated by the Holy Spirit. For those of us who are non-believers, it is enough to think that every artist believes that his inspiration comes from an elsewhere that he cannot define. The iconographer gives a precise name to his source of inspiration and to his elsewhere. From the point of view of movements and forms, there is little room for creativity. Precise rules True canons regulate the composition of the sacred icon. The figure is always frontal. The perspective is inverted or reversed. Id est. The icon opens to the viewer, is presented to the viewer as a revelation, theophany. The icon is not a window through which the human spirit must penetrate the represented world, but a place of presence. In it, the represented world radiates towards the one who opens up to receive it. In the reverse perspective, space is active, not the beholder. Sandler, the icon image of the invisible. There is no chiaroscuro in the icons. Everything is sharp, clear, shining, because it is not representing a portion of reality, but an entity outside our sensitive world. The frame, usually red, outlines the gap, the window to which true beauty looks out. Within this frame, the background is bright, often in gold, to accentuate the figure. The characters can be recognized by their characteristics and attributes. The characteristics are inseparable from the character, such as the physical appearance and clothing. As for Saint John the Baptist, beard, thinness, long hair. Attributes, on the other hand, are additional elements that are added to the character to make it easier to identify. As for Saint John the Baptist, the Jordan River, the cane, the parchment. Characteristics and attributes would take a lesson apart, but the aim of today's lessons is to make you aware that pictorial art has its own language, or rather a plurality of languages, and as many interpretative codes. Personally, I found the writings of Panofsky, Gombrich, and Arnheim enlightening, and they supported and gave foundation to my intuitions. I do not have the pretension and the specific competence to deal with these authors, but it is necessary to indicate them to those of you who want to deepen the subject or understand which area of study on art and art history I refer to when talking about Per altra via, another way. In this lesson, the images are used for educational purposes only, and for the most part are original. Those for which it has been possible to identify the source are mentioned in the image itself. For the others, the author remains available to give credit to any rights holders who request it, using the following address: peraltravia@gmail.com.